Welcome back to the Pushing Through Loss podcast, where we share stories, honor resilience, and embrace strength. I am Kalila Green Siciliano, and it is my honor to begin the journey with you. Today I have somebody who I'm actually really honored that you wanted to come on. Jennifer said that she's been listening to the podcast and she has her own story and experience to share. And I'm so grateful that you reached out and found me and said, can I schedule a time? Because even just from what we've talked about before we started recording, your story, first of all, I mean, it's heartbreaking, but it's also so beautiful in what you've done with your life and what you've done with your living children. And so I just want to, first of all, say welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Thanks. And I guess let's start from the beginning because you said the very first pregnancy you had is your loss.
Yes.
So you really didn't know anything different, which is so weird to think because you always go into a pregnancy thinking, well, of course I'm going to have a baby. So when you lose a baby, even though that's the only thing you know, it's still so heartbreaking.
Oh yeah, it was devastating. Our baby, just her heartbeat just really stopped at 38 weeks. So I was about 2 weeks from my due date.
Wow.
And I actually think I know the exact moment that it happened, but of course I didn't connect those dots at the time, but I was sleeping. I had gotten a job at a daycare because I thought I had this plan. I was going to work in the daycare, bring my baby. I was going to take care of her and the other kids during the day. And I just woke up, like completely woke up and sat up. And I was wide awake. I didn't know why. My cat was like doing that thing on my belly, the kneading thing on my belly. And he was purring and just like really all over me. And then he went to sleep. And I thought, oh, well, he's just, he's
hearing the heartbeat or loving on the baby or whatever.
Yep. And I just went back to sleep. And then when I woke up in the morning, I got up, got dressed, went to daycare, and I thought a couple of times, I was like, oh, she's just not moving very much this morning. She's not moving. And Pam, who ran the daycare, had tons of experience. She was quite a few years older than me. She'd been taking care of kids. And I said, Pam, she's not moving very much this morning. But I was 2 weeks away from my due date. So she was like, don't worry so much. With babies getting bigger and their head is probably getting down and there's not enough room and it's probably fine. And so I remember every day after lunch, the kids would kind of nap. And usually Pam would let me kind of knock out on a little nap myself. So I was kind of laying there and I was like, all of a sudden I'm like, you gotta be more honest with yourself and with Pam here. It's not that the baby's not moving more.
You don't
the
feel
baby's
anything.
Not moving. Yeah, the baby's not moving. So I said, Pam, the baby's not moving. She's like, call your midwife, call right now and go. And so I did. And I was actually being seen at Planned Parenthood at the time because I had no health insurance. And they offered free care. I had a midwife there who I'd been checking in with regularly, doing all the things. So I drove there, got there. My midwife, I remember her bringing out like the ultrasound machine. I sat down. She's like, don't worry. And we're going. And she's trying. And,
so it's like those 2 minutes are your own heart stops.
Yeah. Well, she didn't really say anything. She's like, I mean, she did say something, but she didn't say anything pertaining to the baby. She's like, this is a really old ultrasound machine. I want you to go to the hospital. And as a matter of fact, she offered to drive me. She was like, can I drive you to the hospital? And
wow.
I'm like, no, I need to talk to my husband. I believe at the time we had cell phones, but they were like those big ones that look like walkie-talkies. And I was like, I think I'll go home. And so I drove home. I wanted to call him from our house. I remember when we were in this little apartment, I remember walking up the stairs and there was this box at the door. And I knew what the box was. It was full of baby clothes. My aunt had just been to a mom-to-mom sale and she had picked out all the little dresses and shoes, and she had told me
Aw.
about it, so I knew what was there. And so I
Right.
was like, and at this point, I knew my baby had died. I knew.
Really?
Oh yeah, I knew it.
Oh, interesting.
But I was so calm.
And it sounds like almost in denial. Like you were
Yeah,
like, I'm just going to continue on and hopefully everything's okay.
I was just so calm. So I picked up the box, I opened the door, I took it and I put it with all the stuff that we had like set up for the nursery, and I like just kind of pushed the box underneath. And then I went to call my husband, and I called him, and I didn't get him. I got a voicemail. And so I had to make like this immediate, like, how do you leave a voicemail? So I just was like, I made the decision. I'm going to the hospital. Something's not right. I'll meet you there.
Mhm.
Then I hung up and I called my mom. My mom picked up, and she was like, I'm coming. My mom is the worst person with directions, like the worst. And I'm thinking, how is my mom going to get to the hospital? She did make it. I don't know how she made it, but,
Nice.
and she was
And of
about,
course, this was well before we had Google Maps on the cell
oh
phone.
yeah,
So
my mom, wrong,
that's so funny.
never able to go anywhere without, but she made it, and she was about 2 hours away. Um,
Wow.
So I got to I drove myself to the hospital. I got there and I was like waiting. Kind of, I don't think it was like a waiting room. I think they took me into a room, and I was there by myself for a little while. And I don't know if it was a nurse. I don't think it was a doctor. Someone came in and they started asking me questions. And the questions were like, so what did you do today? Did you take any drugs today? Did you? Yeah, really. It was so interesting. I remember this so clearly. It was like, did you take any drugs? Did you do anything you didn't normally do? Did you reach your arms over your head? Did you exercise? Did you like exercise really hard? All these questions. And so then I started thinking, oh, what did I do? What did I
Right.
do today? And my sister had sent me these new prenatal vitamins, and I did take them. And my first thought was like, oh my
Oh
God,
my
I wonder if there
gosh.
was something in the prenatal vitamins, right? And also, I had this gas leak in my car that I knew about. I knew it was a small gas leak, but I just kept procrastinating and kind of putting it off. And I was like, oh my God, the gas leak killed my baby. Like, I'm sitting there thinking all of these things. I just remember that so clearly. And I was like racking my brain, like, what did I do? What did I do to this baby? Right. And I know, like in retrospect, I know that that's not what those questions are for. I know that they're just trying to figure out what happened. But to me, it started the cycle of what did I do?
Mm-hmm.
And that continued for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't just like, I mean, I knew I didn't do any drugs, I didn't smoke any cigarettes, I wasn't even drinking coffee, for God's sake. But
Right.
I wasn't eating any kind of cheese that had any kind of mold on it, or
Yep. But
like
all those questions, the second they put it in your brain, it's not even like you think of those questions automatically, but then when
yeah,
somebody else starts asking you, it adds so much more dimension because you're like, oh my gosh, they're right. I did something wrong.
yeah, what did I do?
Right.
Yeah. So then eventually my husband got there, and um he sat down next to me and we cried. And he's like, well, what's going on? And I'm like, well, they're going to do an ultrasound. I didn't say that the baby was dead because I didn't really know it 100%. And he said, and this was like the lifesaver to me. He said, I just don't want to lose you too. And that to me allowed me to like hold myself together,
Mm-hmm.
that I still had my husband who loved me and I loved him, and that we were going to be okay. And so then they did bring in the ultrasound machine, and we did go through that process, and they did tell us that there wasn't a heartbeat. And I mean, I knew it.
Mm.
I knew it. Um
It's still that denial piece because I remember even I had the same thing. I made them check. I think the lady with the ultrasound machine was in there for at least 20 minutes. And I kept whispering to my husband, go look at the screen. Try and look at the screen. I want to make sure. Are you sure? Do you see the baby moving? Do you see the heartbeat? And he was like, they're not letting me look. I can't tell. And I was like, I need to know.
yeah. Yeah, there's nothing like that experience, I don't
Nope.
think.
Nope.
My mom eventually made her way into the hospital, and I think it was like, it's all kind of like, that part's all kind of like a blur, like when did
Mhm.
people get there? But they gave us options, and decisions had to be made.
Right.
They said I could go home and give birth naturally, or they said I could be admitted into the hospital and we could do an induction. I chose to have an induction. I think that if this were to happen, if I were to do something like this at my age now, I think I would have gone home.
Really?
Um, yeah, I think I would have.
Interesting.
But know a whole lot about my body, to be honest, or
Right.
how it worked, or the thought of kind of walking around knowing that my baby had died and that I was going to give birth was overwhelming to me at that point in my
Mm.
life. So I went for the induction, and it was not a great event because I went to the same types of rooms where people were having babies, and I
Yep.
could see all the babies.
Yep. And then you can hear I don't know if they did it then, but now they play like a lullaby every time a baby's born. So every time I heard that, I was like, great, I'm here. I know that this baby's gone and I'm gonna deliver soon. And all you're doing is playing the lullaby over and over again.
Oh wow. I don't recall that. I don't recall that, but I do recall during, the induction doesn't happen in 10 minutes. It takes
No.
a long time.
Yeah.
And I remember like holding my IV and walking down the hall with my husband and walking past the rooms, and the rooms have the little feet, the boy and 7 pounds, and congratulations. And
Hmm.
I was not begrudging anyone their baby. It's
No,
just,
no, of
it's
course
just,
not. It
it's,
just hurts.
it's just very painful. Yeah. It's just very, very painful. And for the induction, kind of the first thing I remember is they put the Pitocin drip in my arm. They start the medication, and then my water had to be broken.
Hmm.
And the doctor who came in to do that, this is such a weird thing about the water breaking, because I had so many fantasies about that. I had like these ideas, like I would be at work and I'd still be working, and oh, my water would break and somebody would have to take me to the hospital, or like I'd be at home, or like it's like, when will it happen? How will it happen?
Yep.
And I've had 3 pregnancies and I've never had my water break.
Nope, me
So
neither.
you either?
Nope.
It's like I feel robbed. I don't know if you feel robbed, but I feel robbed.
I do and I don't. I was so nervous for my first that I was going to be like in the synagogue or in my bed or someplace where I'd be like I couldn't clean it up, or I'd be really embarrassed to just have amniotic fluid dripping down my legs. And
Yeah.
I mean, I would joke about it all the time. Like I think I must have been 8.5 months pregnant, and we were at our synagogue, and I was drinking something, and a little kid ran into me and spilled my drink all over the bottom half of my dress.
Oh
And my
no.
husband came over to me and was like, is everything okay? Like, is there a puddle? And I was like, oh, no, 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 no. I just my drink. I'm totally fine.
That's so great.
Yeah. And the only one that even sort of broke naturally was my third. And that was only because I told them in the hospital, like, don't touch breaking my water. I want it to happen when it happens. So that was,
Oh,
yeah, they didn't break it then, but I was already in the hospital. I was already in labor. Like, and then he was born another 6 hours later. So
I
yeah.
well, for this, the doctor walked in and I immediately recognized him. He was a player on my indoor soccer team. We played soccer together.
That's not a little awkward at all.
It was very awkward. And I was like, oh. And I remember him, we knew each other very well, because I don't know if you know, but when men and women play indoor soccer, if a woman scores the goal, it's 2 points. If a man scores the goal, it's one.
No
So he
way.
was constantly setting me up with the ball to score.
That's funny.
So it was like, oh, this is my soccer partner. It's so embarrassing. It was like,
Like,
in
hi.
all of the, yeah. And
Not
what
only am I in the middle of labor, but I'm also delivering a stillbirth. So let's, have a
yeah.
party here or something. That's awful.
No, he was super kind. And I
That's
remember
good.
him saying something like, for a man, I have very small hands. So you're in good hands. you
All
know,
right.
it's good that I can laugh about this now, because it was terrible.
100%.
Because it was terrible.
Right.
But and then he said I could get someone else. And I said, you know what, just do your job. So he did, and that was fine. And the process took a really long time.
Yeah.
And I remember wanting a C-section. I was like, this is ridiculous. Why do I have to give birth to this child? By this time, my dad had shown up, and my mom and dad had been divorced since I was 2, but my husband was there, my mom and my dad, and everyone was around me, the people that I loved. And I'm like starting to go delirious about, I want a C-section. This is horrible. This is awful. We've been doing this for how many hours now? And my mom starts going, we need a patient advocate. We need somebody. My mom was like,
Oh,
yeah, she was a good mom. She really was. And my dad is like, come on into the hall. He like takes my mom
we
out
need to talk out of this room.
and calms her down. And I remember that my midwife had shown up, and she came in and she said, in a nice way, and I can't remember her exact words, but she was like, this is a really painful emotional process. The baby has died. Do you want to be drugged out of your mind right now? And I said, yes, please. And so my midwife is the one, she gave me something, I don't know what,
That just
and
knocked
I
you out.
and I slept for hours,
Wow.
hours and hours and hours after that.
Wow.
And when I woke, I was in full labor. My contractions were like, and it was very little pushing. It was like maybe 2 or 3 pushes. The baby was born, and she was tiny. She
Really?
was really tiny. And I remember holding her, um, looking at her perfect little features and her tinyness, but she could fit in my hand.
Wow.
Like, she was tiny. And nobody really knew at that time, like, what had happened, why she had died. We
Right.
did find out years later, because from that point forward in my next 2 pregnancies, I was at the high risk
Mhm.
clinic. And so over the years, more information came out, but at that point, no one knew, and it was devastating. And she was beautiful, and the nurses let me hold her as long as I wanted to. I would have held her longer, except my husband at the time was having, it was harder for him than it was for me.
Mm.
And I could see his agitation. And as I was looking at her, a tiny little drop of blood came out of her eye duct.
Mhm.
And I knew that the longer that I held her, the more of that type of thing was
Right.
gonna, I probably would have held her anyway, but he couldn't handle it. So they took her, they dressed her up, they took pictures of her with little teddy bears, and the clothes were way too big. They were like hanging off of her.
No.
Um, I of course have kept those pictures, and um, and then weirdly enough, my grandfather had died a couple weeks before my baby died, and I was trying to figure out, what do I do? So I called my grandma. I was like, Grandma, what do I do? And she said, we can bury her with grandpa in the same plot.
That's so sweet.
So they put her like in this wrap, this like pillow thing. And because she wasn't a born baby, because she was stillborn, I was actually allowed to take her. Yeah, which is really interesting. So I gave her to my grandmother, and my mom drove my grandmother to the funeral home. They took her, and they got my grandma bought a little casket and a little headstone, and she was buried right with my grandfather.
Wow.
Yeah, which is amazing because I have gone to see her several times.
And
Um,
it's probably very comforting because she's right there with your grandfather.
yes. And now also with my grandmother. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How special is that?
Yeah, the hospital had some options. Like they have an arboretum, and they have an area where all the stillborn babies are together, and I considered that, but I ended up living here forever, but I hadn't lived here very long, and I was like, I don't know, because I don't know if we'll stay here, and I don't. And it seemed really important to me at the time. Like, where does this baby go?
I mean, I can
Um,
understand why. It's always important when somebody who's had a longer life has to
yeah,
find a burial spot. So why not?
I didn't want to bury her here, and then everyone moved away,
Hmm.
because we'd only been here for a couple years. We ended up
Hmm.
staying, of course, but I didn't know that that's what we were going to do. So I wanted her with family, even though I don't even live over there, but I go there because that's where family is.
Right.
Yeah. So that's what we did. And in my second pregnancy, I was high risk. My third pregnancy, 6 years after the second, when I came back, the high risk doctor was almost like happy to see me. He was like, oh, we have some news. We have some news. We know what happened. So after the
I feel like that
autopsy,
never happens.
yeah, they did know. After the autopsy, they found a blood clot in her umbilical cord. So they knew that that's what had caused her death. And she maybe didn't have enough oxygen and maybe didn't have enough nutrients throughout most of the pregnancy. And
Which
just
could be why she was so small.
eventually, um, but they realized that I have a blood clotting factor. I only have one. Some people have two. Two is dangerous and kills you,
Right.
or could kill you. But when you're pregnant, your blood clots faster.
Right.
And I have one factor. So my blood was clotting or how do I say that? I was having blood clots at a faster rate.
Interesting.
So what they told me when I came back with my daughter Gabby, the third daughter, they said, you probably really shouldn't have ever had children. You're very blessed.
Yeah,
And
the
then they were
fact that
like,
you had a live child at that point, they were probably like, "Oh my gosh, this is a
yeah.
miracle."
And they were kind of like, but get your tubes tied. You probably shouldn't be having babies.
Thanks.
Yeah. And even after they told me that, they still had to get my husband's permission to get my tubes tied.
That's
Yeah.
crazy.
That's the way it worked. I don't know if it still works that way, but that's the way it worked.
All right. You know, you could die, by the way, but we have
Yeah.
to check with your husband.
To make sure that that's okay.
That's crazy.
Luckily, he let me.
Wonderful.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. But I have three daughters. Isabel is the name of my first child, who was stillborn. And then I have Olivia, who is my oldest living child, and Gabby, who is my youngest. So I had three girls.
I love that. I mean, and to be able to share that with them, it sounds like you guys are close from what we talked about before we started recording. You've had the opportunity to stay home now for 2 years with your younger daughter, and then subsequently also your older daughter who's taking community college classes online. And I think that knowing that Isabel is probably looking over you and smiling and just I'm sure, like, even just to be buried and to have that thought to be buried with family, I can't imagine a child being anything other than happy with that outcome. Obviously, I would imagine she'd want to be here, but to know that you can't change what happened and that you could create something beautiful with the situation you were given is really remarkable.
Well, I did in my postpartum with Olivia, my second born, I did have some uh trying time. Okay, the way I can describe it is I would be holding and rocking Olivia, and I was so in love and happy and excited. But then I also felt like I had this other arm
Hmm.
that was like just
Missing.
hurt. Yeah, heartbroken. Like, and I remember some of those nights rocking my baby and just sort of like wishing I was rocking both of them.
Hmm.
I remember that pain.
Hmm.
And I did ask myself, weirdly enough, for years. I think I've just recently gotten over this, but it was like, if I had the choice, which would I choose? Because Olivia is my rainbow child. If
Right.
Isabel had made it, Olivia wouldn't be here.
Right.
It's such a silly question. It's like, but it's like mom torture. It's like, can I
It's
torture
all the what
myself?
ifs.
Yeah. Can I torture myself with this? There's no, it's an impossible question.
Right.
But what I finally realized is it wasn't my decision.
Right.
Like it was not my decision to make. It was out of my control. And I love all three of them.
Right.
Yeah.
After you lost her, did was there anything that stood out that felt like that's something that helped, or on the exact reverse side, that was really the wrong thing for somebody else to do?
What do you mean?
So like I know somebody sat with me afterwards. I had had four perfect pregnancies, three of my own, and then the first surrogate baby. So this was my first loss. And I had a friend that was kind of a newer friend. I'd only known her for about a year and a half. And she literally just sat with me and said, I'm here. And that was
Beautiful.
one of those that I didn't know I needed it until she did it. And I didn't know that I didn't want somebody else to say something or not say something. She just was holding space for me. And I
Hmm.
felt like in that moment, that was perfect versus somebody else who said, like, well, you were just a surrogate. And I was like,
Oh,
screw you.
yeah. I'm sorry.
So,
That's awful.
yeah. So was there, did you have either of those moments?
There were a couple things. So my parents being very kind and generous, even though they had been divorced for years, they put their money together and decided to send my husband and I on a trip. They said, "Oh, you guys need to get out of town, do your thing." But the first week of the trip, we went to Disney, and it was really painful.
I'm sure. Even, I mean, Disney's
Yeah,
supposed to be the happiest place on earth, but
right.
also you see kids everywhere.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I can't say it was awful. It it was really hard on multiple levels. It was the families everywhere, but that also like kind of drew us closer together. But it was also, this is almost embarrassing to admit, it was really hard for me to be there in the heat of Florida, postpartum heavy, with no clothes that fit.
Right.
Like nothing fit right. We were trying to take happy pictures. We both looked terrible. I
Right.
looked worse.
How
Um,
soon after you gave birth did you go?
we were like gone. We went right away.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're
And
still like your body's still adjusting. Your hormones are all over the place. You're still bleeding because you have to get over being pregnant. You're
yeah.
probably still producing milk because your body thinks,
Well, they told me when I left the hospital, the one piece of advice they gave me was be very careful with your breasts. Don't touch them in the shower. Your milk might not come in if you're, and my milk didn't come in.
oh, thank God.
So I was very careful, but my milk never really came in for any of my three pregnancies. And
Oh,
sometimes I
interesting.
wonder how much of that was like,
Psychological.
yeah.
Right.
Um,
But still dealing with all of that. I mean, I live in Florida and postpartum
it,
here is not fun.
it was very uncomfortable and my body image wasn't great.
Right.
And I was of course like devastated and depressed. But the second week we went to I want to say Fort Lauderdale. I'm
Mhm.
not positive, but we went out to the coast
Okay.
and we were on the beach and my ex-husband had never been to the beach before. And it got real playful. Like it, I think this was a much better setting because it was like waves and nature
Just the two of you.
and just the two of us and not so many people around. And he was jumping in the waves like a little boy. And there was just like, there was joy in that. And I asked him, I was like, can we just start making a baby again? And he was like, well, the doctor said we should wait a year. And I said, yeah, I don't want to. And he said, whatever you want, babe, whatever you want. So our Olivia was born 1 month short of, I mean, we basically just got pregnant right away. So,
Wow.
so you want
That
to talk?
she literally is your miracle child
Yeah, she is.
because
Yeah.
it's like almost unheard of. Like they always say your body should, if you've had a loss, your body should then not be pregnant for as long as you were pregnant. So the
Yeah,
fact
not
that
not
she
this
was
bad.
the fact that she was born a month shy of the year, like that's
Yeah,
incredible.
yeah, yeah, and I mean, that kid was so wanted, I can't even tell you, but I
Yeah.
did have I was so in love and so in grief at the same time,
Right.
and I think in many ways, I've been that way ever since in some
Mhm.
ways. Like their birthdays are so close. My
Mhm.
oldest turned 25. I realized that my daughter would have, I mean, she just turned 24. I realized that Isabel would have been 25 this year.
Right.
25 years old.
Right.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Um, it was really important to me. My ex-husband and I got married because I was pregnant.
Oh,
And it
wow.
and him telling me in the hospital that he didn't want to lose me too, and us just like being committed to starting this family and doing our thing, it just meant so much to me. So I think really in many ways it was his support
Mhm.
that really brought me through.
Mhm.
um and I know it was much different for him. He went through his own stuff too. Like, he was born and raised very strict Catholic. My family was also Catholic, but his was like much more. He's from Mexico. They were following the traditions much more closely. And he questioned himself too. Like, what did I do? Did I do something wrong?
Right.
I think he questioned me. Did I
Right.
do something wrong? I think, you know, there is a lot of that. I consider that religious trauma kind of in some ways that because the God that I believe in doesn't punish people in that way.
Right.
It's not we he's he she God is not a punitive force.
Right.
It's
In
a loving.
Judaism, we feel the same way that God doesn't punish you based off of the things that you've done by taking somebody away from you or by killing somebody else. That seems very off to me, and it makes my heart hurt for those religions who could even put that in their head. I did question God after I had the miscarriage, that I did ask a lot why.
Yeah,
But I never questioned that God did it because I did something wrong.
I did.
Did you?
Yeah. I mean, my mom's family was Catholic. She left the church right before I was born. I
Mm.
was raised pretty my mom did everything. My mom had a guru at one point. She I used to tease her about being in a cult. She eventually became a minister for a non-denominational church. She really always told me, find God, and that brings love and joy and all this into your life. And but I wondered, did my lack of religion, I would have called I'm not right now an atheist, but I would have called myself an atheist for a long period of time.
Mhm.
And you know, I I I wondered. You
Mhm.
have to wonder,
Right.
But I don't believe that now, and I don't believe the death of my child was a punishment.
Mm-mm.
I believe that there was something wrong, There was a blood clot, and I do wonder sometimes, if I had figured it out sooner. When my grandfather died 2 weeks before that, I knew that my baby wasn't moving around as much. I could feel that.
Mhm.
My sister was coming in on a flight to go to my grandfather's funeral. And I told my sister, and she's like, we should go to the doctor. And I was like,
No, there's
no,
too much to do.
no, we need to go to the funeral.
Right.
Right. I've wondered if I had gone to the doctor that 2 weeks earlier, could we have saved her?
Who knows?
Right. Could we have saved her? If we had saved her, would her brain have been developed? I
Right.
have two beautiful, strong, artistic, mouthy as hell girls. Right?
Right.
I mean, I didn't get to pick.
Right.
See, I'm
Right.
still struggling with that.
100%. And it's something I think that you'll always have with you. I always say that you're going to live with the grief forever. That's something that's not necessarily going to leave. The pain and suffering is something that can go away. And that's something that your body has to release because it could haunt you forever. But
Oh
the
yeah.
grief of losing your child is never really gone. The grief of losing a loved one is never really gone. It makes you who you are. But like I said, that pain and suffering from that loss is different than carrying the grief.
Yeah, I agree. And my mom died last year from Alzheimer's. And going through that grief with her, a lot of people were telling me, like, I don't know if they were really saying hurry up with your grief, but it kind of felt like that. Or
Mhm.
someone had told me, I said, how do you handle the grief when your mom died? And they said, oh, I put it in a box and I put it away.
That's not
Then
healthy.
that was me. And I was like, no, no, I'm
Not
not
gonna
gonna
work for
do
me,
that. I'm
sorry.
not gonna do that. I'm trying to like work these. But what I realized about grief is that there's part of the grief of my mom that is mine. It
Mhm.
is mine. And it is the love that I have for my mother. And I don't want to rush through it. And I don't want to put it in a box with a fancy bow and bring it out once a year. I want to feel every piece of, almost like feeling every piece of that grief for her is an honoring for her, but it's
Mhm.
also an honoring for me and my
Mhm.
body. And no, I'm not doing that.
Right.
I'm not going to put that stuff down into my body and soul.
Right.
No.
And I truly believe that the more that you can feel it and just sit with it and let it be, scientifically it's shown that emotions take 90 seconds to run the course of your body. And
Oh
so
wow.
if you can sit with that grief for that 90 seconds when it comes at you, it should then also release. And it's not like you're letting go of a part of your mom. You're just letting go of the pain of it.
Yeah.
And you're always going to love your mom fiercely and loyally and until the your last breath, right? And even beyond that, because your kids probably feel the same way, just as grandchildren as opposed to children. And I think that every single time you feel, and I mean, for the baby, for your mom, it comes in waves. There are times where you're walking around totally fine, and then all of a sudden it smacks you in the face. But like I said, you let it run through you, you give it that 90 seconds, and I promise on the other side of that 90 seconds, it feels so much better, and you can appreciate the love that you have so much more.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And I feel blessed. I have lived a blessed life.
That's, I mean, it's incredible that you can see it. There's so many
Yeah.
people who live a blessed life and they are so oblivious to it.
Yeah. I mean, pregnancy losses. I have a niece and her wife, they are trying right now. They're going through IVF to make
Mhm.
a family. And right before Christmas, we thought the two of them had well, they had an egg that implanted, and we were like
Mhm.
really excited. This was the first one that was like going somewhere, and we were like, yes. And then right before Christmas, no reason, no explanation, no heartbeat.
Yep, it
And so,
happens.
and maybe Monday we're doing another implant, but it's making a baby is a freaking miracle.
It really is. And that's one of the things
It's
I see. Like you said before, you would have said you were an atheist. I feel like, I don't know if I was ever an atheist. I definitely questioned God many times in my life, but watching a baby be born, eh, you eh, you can't deny the existence of God. It goes beyond science because even as much as the doctors know, they still don't know enough how to create a baby perfectly every time.
and there's so much like kismet or synchronicity or just things that,
They all have to line up.
yeah, yes, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that it happened the way it was meant to happen.
Yeah. And one day I know in my heart you will see her. You will
I
leave
might
this
have.
world. And I know I went through an experience recently where I watched someone very close to me live the end of their days. And they were one foot in this world and one foot in the other world. And there were things that he was bringing up that nobody had told him, and he was pulling from people that were gone that were telling him these things. And so I am 100% a believer in life after this world, or whatever you want to call it. It's not life, but an existence, an
It's
energy, a
something.
presence.
Yeah.
And I know that you'll see her, and that one day. And she's probably chilling with your grandfather and your grandmother and your mom and having a
Yeah.
grand old time.
I might have caught a glimpse here and there over the years.
Really?
Yeah.
Those are beautiful moments.
Yeah. Yeah. I have no doubt of her existence.
Yeah.
And I know that I am always her mother and that she knows that I love her
Yeah.
and she loves me and she's part of the family. It's just a different it's just she's
She connects with you differently.
I actually believe this might sound a little hokey, but I actually believe that she is an angel. Angels are different than humans and that she was never really meant to be born.
I mean, I think that's beautiful.
Yeah. And I have seen her a couple times.
Really?
Yeah, I have.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
When you can connect like that on that next level, I think the first time it happened, I was so overwhelmed. I was like sobbing, ugly tears sobbing.
Oh, yeah.
And and then like now that I'm a little bit more used to it, I smile like the biggest smile when something like that happens.
Yeah. There's part of life that we just don't understand.
Yeah.
And I think it's okay. It's probably actually pretty freaking beautiful.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think that's the beauty of life that we're not meant to understand all of it.
I know, but don't you try really hard to figure it all out?
Oh,
I do.
for sure. But I think also if we had it all figured out, life would just be like, meh.
Right, right. Yeah.
One of the stories I love the best, and I think that it really plays into this is there's a reason we have a little crease in between our lips. And when we're born or when we're in the womb, it's said that an angel is told from God to tell the baby the secrets of the world. And as they're born, the angel says shh on their lips. And
Uh,
that's why there's a little mark here. And I think that if you if you already know all the secrets of the world, then you can't be in this world. Like that it just doesn't it's not copacetic, it's not whatever the word is for it, and
yep.
not to belittle in any way, shape, or form that Isabel shouldn't or should be here, but maybe she just knew everything
Yeah.
and she needed to be with the angels.
I really believe that. Well, I mean, how can I believe any different? I
Right,
believe she really wasn't meant to be here in that way, in the same way that Olivia and Gabby are here.
right,
And she's still my daughter.
for sure.
Yeah.
Do you celebrate her birthday every year with your other two girls?
No, not really. Um, it's interesting. She was born on my dad's birthday, so it can't it never goes unnoticed. Like I
Right,
know it every year when it's
right.
here, and I actually, you know, during the pregnancy loss, they made like this little purple box and and it's got a ribbon tie and they put the little socks that I bought for her and her hand and footprints and a little lock of her hair is in there and photographs. And I really kept that box hidden for many, many years.
Mhm.
When my mom died, I brought the box out.
Oh, interesting.
And when my mom died, I made a little, I don't know if you'd call it an altar, or I have a little table and I put a picture of my mom. And right now we still have my mom's ashes. So my mom's ashes are there, and I put a picture of my grandmother, and I got pictures of my brother and sister both passed. I got pictures of them, and I got a picture of Isabel out, and I put it up there. And so I've made like this little altar, and when I meditate in the morning, I put a candle on, and I sit in front and I look at them, and I think the reason I never did it before is the pictures have there's like spots. There's like that spot where her skin had torn and there was like a little bruising on her face. And I think I was just uncomfortable with how people might react to my baby, to the pictures of her. And you can also tell that she's dead in the picture. There's another woman's hand. I wish it was my hand. I wish they had taken pictures of me holding her.
Right.
It's a nurse, a beautiful, wonderful soul of a nurse who was holding my baby and taking pictures for me. I'm glad I have those pictures. But I think that is why I think I was really uncomfortable with the physical markings on her face.
Mhm.
Says me who has a physical marking on my face right now. I didn't know how people would accept it. And I think that people talk a little more about pregnancy loss now than they
Mhm.
used to. Uh, that's one of the reasons I really wanted to be on your podcast, is because I really believe we need to talk about it. Listening to your podcast, it's been 25 years since my baby didn't make it. And your podcast still helps me so much. It just helps. It helps to hear the stories. It's so sad that it's so many women and so many babies, and it's so many more than we ever imagined. And it so many people carried that. I carried it for years without really talking about it a lot. My children knew, but I didn't really make a big deal about it.
Mhm.
And I learned that my grandmother had one miscarriage. My other grandmother had a child who died, an infant, and no one talked about these things. No one talked about it. So women just carried it. And it feels so good to be able to talk about a child that is mine.
Mhm.
It feels good to listen to other women talk about their child. It's healing.
It really is. And I'm so glad that you can feel that and that you can listen to other people's stories, because that is why I created this podcast. Because when I went through it, I felt like I only knew one person that had ever experienced a stillbirth. I didn't know a bunch of people who had miscarriages, and all of a sudden people were coming up to me, "Oh, my first pregnancy was a miscarriage. Oh, this pregnancy was a miscarriage. Oh, I lost this baby at this many weeks." And I was like, first of all, how have I not known? These are some of my closest friends. How do
Yep.
I not know this? Are you
Oh
kidding
yeah.
me? And so the fact that even my very first interview that I did was somebody that was from a therapy group that I was in for people who had lost a pregnancy or had a stillbirth or had an infant who didn't survive. And it was somebody from that group. And I was so appreciative that she was my first interview, because it was something that we were already comfortable talking about. And she brought up this thing that she did where she held the teddy bear that somebody gave her that was supposed to be her son's,
I heard that one.
and she put the weight of what her son would have been with the teddy bear. And
Oh
I
my
thought,
gosh.
I was like, I am so grateful that you're saying that, because there are so many things that we do that we think, if I ever told this to somebody, they're going to think I'm nuts. They're going to send me to the crazy house. They're going to have me prescribed all sorts of medications. And yet it's so normal. We all do all these things. We and variations of these things. And that is why I'm so glad that you are getting so much out of listening, because I want you to be able to release it. I want you to be able to love Isabel and not hold on to the pain, and know that you're not alone. Know that there are other people who are going through something so similar, and something that can be shared, and it's okay.
Yeah. And I feel like the sharing of it is just so releasing and healing for people.
Hmm.
It's just, and the next thing that's come for me, is menopause. Nobody wants to talk about that either.
Right.
It's like all these things. First of all, no one will talk about your period. You
Right.
can't have a tampon in school. You got to hide it. And
God
then,
forbid.
yeah, it's like every step it's something.
Right.
But pregnancy loss is big. And I think for me, when it happened to me, I didn't know how common it was.
Right.
I had no idea.
And the numbers have only increased since
Yeah.
then.
No idea. No
Yeah.
idea. So
Yeah. And the fact
yes.
that you had two grandmothers who both, one had a miscarriage, one lost an infant. I mean, you're right. Nobody ever talked about it. And ironically, like my family, one side of my family all escaped the Holocaust, and side of my family came here in like the very early turn of the century in the 1900s, but from the Russian pogroms and things like that. And so even then there was so much death that was talked about constantly, because as Jewish people we're persecuted everywhere we go. So like miscarriage was a whole other layer that nobody ever wanted to talk about. We already talk about too much death. Why would we want to talk about losing a pregnancy or a baby? Like it just never even entered any of our heads to ask each other what you're going through in that respect.
Right. And then there's the whole thing too about don't let anyone know you're pregnant until
Right.
you're 3 months in, which I get that. But the same point, but then if you have a miscarriage, nobody knows you're going through anything.
Yep. Yep. I told a handful of my closest friends when I was very first pregnant with my first daughter, my first child. And somebody said to me, how could you tell other people? What if you lose the baby? I said, those are the 5 people that I'm going to want to talk to if God forbid I lose the baby. So you can think whatever you want and you can have your own rules. Do not put your rules on me. I will tell whoever I please. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think for people, whichever, whatever way you need to do it,
Right.
for the woman, make your
Right.
choice. Do what you
Right.
need to do.
Your rules are your rules.
Yep.
Same thing, like in Judaism, you're not really supposed to put together the nursery. And we didn't. Like
Uh,
my husband and I were very careful about what we ordered and what we got. I ordered the stroller before my daughter came. I ordered the car seat because I was like, if we show up at the hospital, my husband's not going to know anything about the car seat, about what to do and how to put it in, whatever. And I was like, I'm not doing it right after I had a baby. But we did not put the crib together. Like the crib sat in pieces in her room. I think maybe I put the border up because I loved classic Winnie the Pooh and I had dreamt always that my children would have classic Winnie the Pooh in their rooms, which they all did. Um, but like I didn't paint it a special color. And even that, I had another friend who was like, don't even put the crib in the room. And I was like, I live in a 2-bedroom condo. Where am I supposed to put the crib? Are you
yep.
kidding me?
That was a piece in ours. I had put the stuff together. I also did Winnie the Pooh and for Isabel. And when we were pregnant with Olivia, my ex was like, you are absolutely not doing the nursery this time. We
It
didn't have a baby shower. We didn't have any stuff.
I
He's
know
like,
it makes it feel
absolutely not.
weird.
Yeah. He was like, absolutely not. Because that was his belief too. And we had I don't know if argument is the right, but we definitely had discussion. He's like, what are you doing? Why are you getting this stuff? And I didn't have any of those feelings. I didn't understand it.
Right.
And we actually only had a 1-bedroom apartment. So we had bought a little small, it wasn't a big nursery. We just made a little corner of the room with
Mhm.
but I can still tell you what that looked like.
For sure. And to have
I
to
had,
come home to that every single day, I can imagine also it adds another layer of grief on top of it.
it does. I had so much stuff and I packed it all up. My mom's friend had adopted a little girl from Russia. I gave it all to her. I was like, it's all
Oh.
yours. Every bit of it.
Yeah. That was after I had the miscarriage, I made the pregnancy loss toolkit. And one of the things in the workbook that I had said at the very beginning was like the things that were helpful. And something that my husband did was put away all of my maternity clothes. He knew it still fit, thank God, so he left some of those out. But the things that I knew I was going to be wearing as I got bigger, he's the one that packed them all up. And I that was something I never would have thought of. That, but I knew that if I had seen like one of my favorite maternity dresses, I would have lost it. I just would have been a puddle on the floor.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah.
How intuitive and kind.
Yeah, he's not a very good planner, but those are the things like he notices those little things. So the credit, I give credit where credit is due because I could not have survived that without him.
It is kind of shocking how how important the clothing is.
Yeah,
That was it was hard being in Florida with no clothes that fit except maternity clothes
right,
without being pregnant.
right. And
Yeah,
you still kind of look pregnant.
you did. I did. Yes,
Yeah.
I did.
After
Yes, I
after I
did.
had this surrogate baby, I was like, I used to be a part of a Jewish women's theater group in Los Angeles, and I had the surrogate baby, and the show happened to be the next night. And I am one who I don't like staying in the hospital. I'm like, get me out of here as soon as possible. So I delivered him Friday morning, and by Saturday night, I was like, am I done? Can I go home? And they were like,
Wow.
yeah, your bleeding's under control. Like you're good. I went to the show. My best friend drove me. And I figured, because I was like, I'm just going to be sitting in a chair. Like, I'm not doing anything. And I want to support all my ladies that I'm friends with. And I remember getting there and I was like, I look so good. Like, I don't look pregnant anymore. And somebody walked up to me and was like, when are you having the baby? And I'm like,
Oh,
I
oh,
yesterday. I had the baby yesterday.
yeah.
So yeah, you totally look pregnant still.
I can't even get my feet into shoes. It's
No.
like, yeah, I know. I know.
Yeah. So it's all of it. But I'm grateful that there are other avenues that people can express their grief. I'm grateful so much that I was able to create this podcast, and
It's
I'm grateful for people like you who are willing to share their stories.
I think it's for me, it's not even that I'm willing to, I want to. I
Mhm.
want there to be a record of my child somewhere,
Mhm.
so it's like I want to talk about it because I want people to know. I want them to know her. I want in the little bit that I know of her, I want them to know of her.
Right.
And I'm really grateful to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm honored to have you on here.
Thanks.
If people want to reach out and find out more about you or find out anything, reach out and just say hi. Where can they find you?
Well, let's see, where can they find me? I write on Medium. It's called Jennifermoormanbolanos. It's Bolanos. I'm on Facebook, Instagram under the same, and I have my own podcast called Madness Cafe Podcast. It's not just mine. I have a partner, Raquel. And we talk about women's issues. We don't talk a ton about this kind of thing, although we have talked about it on the podcast a little bit here and there.
Well, if you
Um,
ever want to guest, let me know.
oh, we'll book you.
Perfect.
And let's see. I'm not working at the moment, which is amazing. It's never been like that for me. So you can't find me at work.
I think that's perfect because then you just get to have fun.
Sort of. Yeah, sort of.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we will put all of that in the show notes. Thank you so, so much. Like I said, I'm just so grateful. I'm so glad that you are excited to share about Isabel and your other daughters. I'm glad that you reached out and I really appreciate this conversation.
Yeah, thank you. It's been my pleasure and I appreciate your work.
Thanks. Thank you for joining me today on Pushing Through Loss. I hope this episode has provided support, understanding, and a sense of community. Remember, you are not alone on your journey, and you have the strength to face the challenges that come your way. If you found value in today's conversation, please leave me a review and consider sharing it with others who may benefit. Together, we can help each other heal and activate our inner strength warriors. Stay tuned for more empowering conversations, and until next time, you got this.